Hey, Changemaker! Welcome to Learning for Good, the only podcast that teaches nonprofit leaders how to leverage training to drive performance, improve capacity, and fuel their mission impact. Do you ever feel like your nonprofit is growing, but your people just aren't keeping up? Or like you're fixing the same problems over and over? Do you wonder how to build confident, capable staff who know how to lead, not just execute? If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I know how hard it can feel to get people to do what's expected of them. Trust me, I have 3 kids. I've tried telling people what to do and how. I've tried the traditional training approaches, and I realized that just doesn't work. And that's when I started researching what does work. Now I help mission-driven leaders use learning to drive performance, build capacity, and make change that lasts. And I'm sharing it all on this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's Learning for Good.
Employee turnover. If you've been in the nonprofit sector for long, you've probably heard lots of talk about the high rates of turnover. You might have even experienced the impacts of it. Nonprofit HR conducted a survey in 2021 on talent retention in the sector. 42% of responding nonprofit leaders expected employee turnover rates to increase in 2022. And now here we are in 2025 facing funding changes and budget cuts. I can only assume we'll continue to see this turnover. And it hurts. It hurts our impact. It hurts our ability to fulfill our mission because we lose capable people. We lose institutional knowledge. We lose our current and future leaders. And as someone who spends a lot of time developing nonprofit staff, this makes me incredibly sad. We need talented, capable, confident leaders in this sector. We need to hire them. We need to develop them, and we need to keep them. But what happens when we don't? What's the plan when that leader leaves? We know it costs time and money to replace them. It impacts morale, it impacts productivity, and so much more. That's where succession planning comes in. I've asked Naomi Hattaway to join me today. Naomi is an expert at helping organizations navigate big workplace transitions like leadership changes. And I can't wait for us to learn from her. Succession planning isn't a topic too many of us in L&D focus on, but it's an important one, and we have a role to play. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Naomi Hattaway is an expert guide to organizations and individuals who are ready to do better when it comes to navigating workplace transitions. Through her Leaving Well framework, she offers clarity, tools, and practices that stick, and guidance that supports a diverse client portfolio. Her deep understanding of organizational health spans multiple industries and combines strategic visioning, organizational development, and community care. She delivers a deep commitment to equitable practices, a willingness to have tough conversations, strong project management and facilitation skills, and compassion and generosity to every interaction and facet of her work. As a speaker, she has delivered keynotes at Union Pacific's Law and Risk Conference and the Families and Global Transition Conference in both Washington, D.C. and The Hague, Netherlands. She has spoken at conferences and presented workshops as well as speaking engagements with NERSC, Nonprofit Association of the Midlands, Creative Mornings Omaha, and Creative Mornings field trips. After living across the U.S., her family moved to India, where they lived for 3 years, and she learned to thrive in the midst of chaos. Following 1 year in Singapore, they moved back to the U.S. and have traipsed their way through Florida, Virginia, Ohio, and Nebraska, and are currently living back in Florida. Naomi's love languages are accountability and really good playlists. Naomi, welcome to the show.
And I'm so glad to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
I am too, but before we do, I have to know one song on your playlist. What's one song that you love that you would want other people to listen to?
So I actually have to give you two. One is like a current favorite, and then the other one is on the topic of leaving well. So the first one is by Kai, I think Kai Tempest is how they say their name. And it's a spoken word mashup called Hold Your Own, and it's powerful. I get teary every time I listen to it. And then the leaving succession planning related one is You Can Do This Hard Thing by Carrie Newcomer.
All right. Good recommendations. Everybody's going to be like searching that. Hopefully after the podcast ends.
Right. Listen to this one first. Listen to this first.
I should have asked this question at the end. Oh, that's okay. That's all right. Okay. So as we dive in, one of the things I love to hear is a little bit about your career journey. I think it just helps paint the picture of how you got where you are, why this is important to you, why leaving well is important, and just puts a little context into what you're doing now. So tell us a little bit about your career journey.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll share just the part that is most relevant to leaving. We lived overseas, like you mentioned in my bio, in New Delhi, India, and in Singapore. And during that time, I wasn't able to work. And so I did a lot of nonprofit, NGO, volunteer work. And when we moved back to the United States, I was doing a double thing of adjusting to a lot of transition in our lives from moving the family. And I also was navigating a lot of goodbyes from the relationships that I had started while doing all these amazing volunteer opportunities. There was a man named Jerry Jones who had a leaving well concept as it related to expats. And it really is borrowed from hospice care. It also is really important for military assignments, those kind of things. The idea is that you can be better in the next place that you land if you say goodbye properly to the place that you're leaving. When we landed back in the United States, I started working for a very well-known international housing nonprofit. The short version of the story is that I was named as a successor to the executive director who had been in her role for 20 years. Found out very quickly that it was in name only. She had no intention of leaving. That was back in 2019, and she was still the executive director. I left loudly. It was not aligned with my values. There was a lot of other things going on that just weren't a great fit. And what happened is after I left loudly, and by saying that, I mean that I wrote a letter to the board of directors. I shared with my team very openly and had some public conversations about it. And I had individuals reaching out to me on a regular basis saying, I need to leave also. Could you please help me? So the first 2 years of that process, I was helping individuals leave. And then realized that systemically, I really wanted to have the organizations bear the responsibility because it's not up to a single individual. I've been doing this consulting work on my own in the leaving space for the last 3 years or so. And then what I do now, I best describe it as a couple of buckets. One is that I serve in interim CEO and executive director roles when an organization finds themselves without for any reason. And that can be resignation, retirement. It can mean that they have died, honestly. That's another reality of people leaving. The other thing that I do is proactive work, succession planning, like we'll talk about sabbatical policies, board development, et cetera.
Awesome. I love that your framework is based in kind of other things outside of HRE world. I think that's a missed opportunity when we don't look outside of our own realm for inspiration. And how cool that you were able to draw that from the expat community, from military, from hospice care, right? So many places.
Well, and the good thing that's great about that is when I talk to a prospective client or when I'm speaking or what have you, almost everyone has an example that they can relate to. When I ask, have you ever moved? How did that go? Did you feel cared for? Did you feel abandoned? Did you feel exhausted? The other thing is that I'm just on a mission, even if it's not a paid contract or a paid gig, I'm so on a mission to get more people to just acknowledge that people leave. As a reality, we act as though it's like a surprise every time someone turns in their notice, and it's none of us are at our first job. So that's another piece of my work is just messaging and narrative shift.
Yeah, I love that. So part of your work then is in succession planning, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get into some of those details, I like to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. We're all talking about the same thing. So how do you define succession planning? What is that?
Yeah. So often when I talk about succession planning, people immediately bring up the HBO show Succession, which is a series of a very wealthy family where the father is definitely the patriarch and he is making his decisions about who he's going to pass his many billions of dollars in businesses to. It's actually very similar. It's the same concept, but it's also not just big companies or wealthy people. In the nonprofit space, I really feel that succession planning has such a core foundational line to program quality. Like you mentioned at the top, mission delivery, team retention, and then also protecting funder relationships. So very practically, it's about identifying and helping to develop internal talent for key roles far before you need them. It also is really important, I think, for people to think about mapping critical positions, not just the CEO or the executive director. The first thing I say to all my clients is, let's not just do this for the executive team. Let's do this for everyone. And then what is beautiful about it is because we talk about succession planning, it's a living plan. It's not a one and done. But the other thing is that you get to ensure organizational continuity when changes occur, which I think is the beautiful kind of correlation between L&D and succession planning.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective.
Yeah, I mean, I can picture, right? We've all kind of been in that situation where someone left and we're scrambling to figure out basic things about their role and how we're going to step in and fill it until that role is filled. It is a little bit of a time of chaos. So to think about organizational continuity, you have all this institutional knowledge, you have processes and things that these people carry, and we're able to plan ahead and help create that continuity. That is really appealing to me personally. I know some people in learning and development might say succession planning, that's not really our job. So why is it important for learning and development to understand succession planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think when you and I first talked about this, it was like this light bulb for me of, oh, this is actually part of the missing piece, honestly. I think about in your work, you're already developing talent and helping with continuity. Succession planning then adds strategic direction or helps people get a guidepost or like, why are we doing this and what are we heading towards? I think it also really helps connect what you all are doing in the L&D world to almost like organizational survival. If that doesn't sound too like dire, the mission continuity is so important. A lot of times an individual leader thinks that their legacy is about them and their role in that time frame, but it's really just about the community that you're serving. And so without succession planning, developing people and developing talent almost ends up being in a vacuum. I think that succession planning could help position L&D as a concept and as an impact more as a strategic partner and not just a training provider. So I think that there's even some things to think about as you're pitching new clients. Add in a little bit of like, and we can also talk about succession planning, which then helps your organization with your continuity.
Yeah, I love that. I feel in a lot of nonprofits still struggle a little bit with like career planning processes, right? What is the next step? They tend to be pretty flat and hierarchical structure. And so there's only so many places you can move up within one organization, which again, then means more people are going to be moving out than up, which creates these gaps. And so having that organizational continuity makes a lot of sense. And being able to connect learning and development directly to succession planning and how do you want to move leaders through your organization really helps with that career pathing as well.
I think the other thing, Heather, on that too is I like to ask leaders how they offboard someone. They'll usually say we have an exit interview. And I always encourage and almost challenge people to add in the idea of a stay interview and thinking about career planning. Most people freak out a little bit and they're like, if we start talking about what I'm about to share with you, people are going to want to leave or they're going to think about leaving more. The idea of a stay interview is just to build in moments in the employee's journey where you're having a sit down with their manager and they're able to ask questions like, are you happy here? What on your job description did you think you were going to get to do and you haven't? What other projects on the team do you see that you could help fill a gap and you'd like an opportunity? The other thing that's just really beautiful, and it seems so simple, but update their resume and say, I noticed that you haven't been included this massive project that you worked on. Make sure that's on your resume. And that's a beautiful way to also, it remarkably actually helps with retention because a lot of employees then feel like they actually are cared for along the way and not just at offboarding.
Hey, Learning for Good listener. I appreciate you joining me each week to get tips and tricks for nonprofit L&D pros. I love sharing my experience and bringing you top guests from the field. But I'm not the only one doing the work around here. This podcast is edited and produced by my friends at Idea Blossoms. Idea Blossoms partners with consultants and organizations who either have or want to start a podcast. They do everything from the initial podcast launch to monthly podcast management and can support you with audio and video editing, as well as content repurposing if you want to share key ideas through blogs or newsletters or social media. I'm sharing this for two reasons. One, I am so grateful for Idea Blossoms and how they help me bring episodes to you each week. But two, I know many of you have or have considered offering a podcast as part of your learning strategy. As a key contributor and sponsor of this podcast, Idea Blossoms is offering an exclusive 30% discount for Learning for Good listeners, applied to the first invoice. They have 2 spots open for 2025, so head to ideablossoms.com or email Rosa at ideablossoms.com to get started. You can find links in the show notes. And don't forget to mention the Learning for Good podcast to claim this incredible offer.
I love the idea of a state interview. So as we think about learning and development, we think about this connection that exists. What do you see as that kind of intersection between learning and development and succession planning?
Yeah.
What is our role? We're developing the leaders, but what does that look like?
Yeah, that was actually where the light bulb came when we talked first. I will take an organization through succession planning using a template, a series of workshops, some worksheets, all those things, where it kind of is like, and here you go, good luck, is when it comes to the development of those people who they have named. Now, I want to be clear that I don't necessarily recommend that an organization name a human in their succession plan. I think it's much more healthy to do a role. But learning and development can go such a long way when you think about literally developing the people that need to be prepared to take over should something or when something happens. So I think that creating targeted programs, leadership tracks, mentoring, stretch assignments that are super specific to whatever the succession plan is. A lot of organizations now are creating succession plans that have co-leaders to step in. So it's not just one person. If we're thinking of the CEO, it might be 3 directors. Then how do those 3 directors, where are their gaps? That could be a beautiful way to not only spot emerging talent, but really recommend them for succession and have them be the best they can be. The other thing that I want to say too is, like you mentioned, there's only so many spots to move up. A healthy organization knows that it's not just about them and that employee. That employee is going to go on and do other things. And so I want to encourage people listening to consider your L&D investment in that person and not just the length of their time with your organization. I think the other thing that would be beautiful is just thinking about, to me, learning and development is how that can be owned. And if you add that to the strategy of succession planning, it really identifies the who and the what and the why. So it's really just a beautiful combination when you add the work of development with a strong succession plan.
That was really beautifully said. So when I think about learning and development, I think about where they sit and the challenges they face. Some of them might be feeling like they're not at the table. They're not in these conversations. They're not invited to the succession planning table. So what are some questions they can ask to find those opportunities to support succession planning in your organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that because it's not a topic that is super comfortable, it's like in the US, death is not a comfortable topic. We don't like to talk about death. I am constantly asking people, do you have your estate plans done and your wills? And people are like, no. And I'm like, great, I'll send you some templates. And it's the same with succession planning. So I think if you don't feel like you're at the decision-making table, you don't feel like you're in a leadership role where you are able to influence this, some of the questions that you might want to bring up. One is, what leadership capabilities does our organization need in the next 2 to 3 years that we don't have today? That is not specifically addressed to succession planning, but in what comes out of that could be some things where you start bringing up, do we have a succession plan? And that's a very simple question that can just be asked also. Ask your manager, your direct report, or your direct manager, does this organization have a succession plan? And they'll squirm and they'll probably say, why are you asking? And I think that there's another opportunity for them then, if you don't feel like you're a decision maker, to say, I'd like to help with mapping out development opportunities so that we can be prepared for future leadership needs. That right there is a nugget that's an organization should be thrilled to have someone offering. I think the other thing, depending on your relationship with your manager, you can ask her to review org charts with your senior leadership and just say, where are we going? What gaps do we have now? What gaps will we have in the future? And then I think the big question too, which feels a little scary, what will the organization lose if so-and-so leaves tomorrow? If our CEO has something happen to them, what's at risk? Some of those things can just be, and this is a great time. We're recording this in summer of 2025, where the landscape with funding is wildly shifting and funders are nervous. You could bring it up by just saying, this is bigger than funding. What happens if our leadership is tired or something happens with their family? And then you can just gently encourage conversation. I think the other big thing that's important is no one needs to know everything and have all the answers. Just having the conversation is what's important.
Yeah, I think being bold enough, confident enough to have that conversation, but doing it in a way like you're saying, where it feels more comfortable, it feels less threatening. How can we help? How can we make sure that the organization is ready and coming at it from a supportive perspective?
There's also so many, unfortunately, there's a lot of great examples of really terrible situations where they didn't have a plan. And so that's another recommendation, is just do a Google search of failed succession planning and then insert your town or your state. And then that can be another way to like soft lob it so that it's not so direct. And you can say, did you hear about organization XYZ? I'd really love to see if we can do anything we can to prevent that from happening. The other thing that I think is really important to bring up, and I just actually recorded a YouTube video about this morning, is it's important to also talk to your funders. And that is a super uncomfortable thing, but donor trust erodes when we stop being transparent. And so that's another thing. If you're not in a decision-making role, then that's going to feel awkward and you might not have access to the funders. But if you are a CEO, ED development team, there's really a lot of power in saying to your funder, we need to be prepared and protect your investment, and we'd like to talk about succession planning. The other powerful thing you can do is say to your funder, do you have capacity planning dollars that you can provide our organization to specifically do succession planning, and with a learning and development lens, so that we can also train the team so that they're not left unprepared.
Those are two really great examples using that to kind of start the conversation, or like you said, kind of the opposite approach of like, how can we be proactive? How can we talk to our funders and see how we can make sure that we have what we need to be able to invest in these programs? Are there other things that you would recommend? Any other words of advice for learning and development folks?
I think that I would say that even if you don't have formal buy-in from the higher ups, I think that there are ways that inside of your teams or inside of your departments, you can start doing cross-training and the idea of succession planning, even without formal approval and even without a succession plan. I think what's beautiful about that is when it happens holistically like that, then you can, as a group, say to your department head or what have you, hey, we really feel this is important and we did the work. So here's how we've been cross-training over the last however many weeks or months. Here's what it looks like. And we also penciled in, if something should happen to me or when it does or when I leave, so-and-so has what they need and here's what we've done. That's powerful. So that would be one advice. I think the other thing is just everyone listening, please remember that nonprofit leadership transitions directly impact your community and your cause. Having that gap at whatever level it is, frontline staff, outreach worker, all the way across to the people signing and writing checks, it really impacts the communities you serve. And so succession work is actually mission critical, and it's not just HR. Not to say HR is just HR, but it's really important. And I think the last thing I would say is don't wait for permission to think strategically about this. It's going to feel uncomfortable, and it's also going to always be messy. Talking about endings is never easy, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Very good advice. And speaking of endings, I do want to revisit the two songs or the two items from your playlist, because I'm going to do a quick closing and then people are going to want to go search those. So what were those again?
Yes. So it's Hold Your Own from Kai Tempest. And then You Can Do This Hard Thing by Carrie Newcomer.
Awesome. Naomi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Heather.
We always talk about wanting to be more strategic. We want to be good partners in our organizations. This is an amazing way for us to do that. We might not be at the succession planning table, right? We might not be in the room when that's happening, depending on our role, but we can be an essential part of the process. And that is mission critical. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice, share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.